Yeah.
Is it full screen or is it minimized? You good with that?
Yeah.
Hello and welcome. This is Solve Climate by 2030, Envisioning New Jersey's Response. Um, as you are probably aware, this is a national enterprise initiated by Eban Goodstein of the Bard College. And in every state, in every part of the country, there are sessions like this taking place. The idea is that we bring together uh, all individuals, stakeholders that care about climate change and act on the issue of uh, climate change with the idea of getting to 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2030. Sorry. Suddenly occurred to me that my slides might not be in the right order. Hello and welcome to Solve Climate by 2030, Envisioning New Jersey's Response. As you're probably aware, this is a national effort initiated by Eban Goodstein of the Bard College in New York. The idea was in 2018, October 8th, 2018, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change at the United Nations came out with a subcommittee report which argued that we had literally 12 years in 2018 to take action to make sure that we did not go beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius increase in global mean temperature. So there are two things that are important about this. This was in 2018 and it was a 12-year warning. And the second thing is that it's 1.5 degrees Celsius global mean temperature. The idea of this event was to bring together people, the best minds that we could find across the country in every state, to envision state-specific actions that we could take to check climate by 2030. The way in which the evening is going to play out is that we have a group of panelists who are going to talk about climate solutions for New Jersey with the idea of 2030 as a deadline for action. We're going to have Michael Edelstein, Ramapo College, Alexa Torres, an ecofeminist climate activist, Harriet Sugarman, Climate Mama and Ramapo College, Lynn Cherry, Young Voices for the Planet, Paula Rogovin, grassroots activist par excellence, Matt Smith, who handles Food and Water Watch for New Jersey, Jeff Tittle, Sierra Club, and Amanda Novello of Sustainable Jersey City. They're going to talk about their specific pieces. Mike and Alexa will do a level setting. Harriet and Lynn will then talk about transforming education. Paula and Matt will talk about the need to stop fossil fuel infrastructure and to push for renewables. And then Jeff and Amanda will talk about municipal and state actions for climate change. That's the setup for the evening. Then we will have a breakout rooms, 3 breakout rooms on the 3 topics that we talked about: transforming education, stopping fossil fuels and switching to renewables, municipal and state action for climate change. These will be the 3 breakout groups. We break for an hour, come back, and everybody reports back to the entire group their top 3 actions for that particular sector issue. This webinar is available in recorded form. If you need it, just reach out to me. My name is Ashwani Vasisht, and I direct the sustainability program at Ramapo College. We're going to switch now to Mike Edelstein, who is going to introduce set the level for this event and introduce the rationale for the way in which it's structured. Mike, take it away.
So I'm just trying to get my slide to appear here. It did it during the practice session, but it's not opening. For some reason, I'm not sharing my screen. Do you have to give me sharing screen privileges?
No, if you just press the green share button on the bottom, Mike, that'll move you into it.
Can you see it now?
No, you need to double click it a couple times. Share.
You can see it?
Yeah. Double click share on the bottom.
Mike, when you do start, get your screen up.
Can you see it now?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
When you do start, Mike, give it 30 seconds of silence on the first slide and then talk. I can edit all this out.
Yeah, I know. I'm Mike Edelstein, professor of environmental psychology at Ramapo College. And I'm here to discuss setting the context for our discussion of solving climate by 2030. I wanted to start out by looking at the context we're in right now, the coronavirus pandemic. And when I began revising the 3rd edition of my book, Contaminated Communities, I realized that I had started that book, interestingly enough, by citing Daniel Defoe. In A Journal of the Plague Year, Daniel Defoe chronicled the transformation of everyday life caused by the Great Plague of London of 1665, which killed some 100,000 people. As early news of the plague abroad reached them, Londoners nervously began to watch the bills of mortality. The weekly reports of number and cause of deaths in each parish, which served as indicators of the plague's approach. Many fled the plague, leaving the city comparatively empty. The wealthiest were most likely to be able to leave. Others employed in the trades or lacking resources were generally forced to remain, only to face unemployment resulting from the disruption of London's economy. A plague culture emerged within London. Fear of strangers became the norm. Parents, not knowing they were diseased, inadvertently infected their children. The Lord Mayor began shutting up sick people in their houses on July 1st, 1665. No one knew how the infection spread, so various superstitions emerged. People came to define any suspicious occurrence or symptom in light of the plague. Not only was the daily life of Londoners dramatically affected by the plague, but their entire way of seeing and comprehending the world was altered. The psychological and social dynamics of combining uncertain, invisible, and unpredictable environmental causes and dreaded consequences was well demonstrated by these events. I know this all sounds familiar, and my goal here was to really talk about contamination as a new plague And now we need to look similarly at climate change and think about climate change as a collection of myriad plagues affecting health and habitability, causing connected yet asynchronous and diverse, global and local, cumulative, unpredictable yet certain, and escalating exponentially over time. Climate change is something that we now need to think of as a double whammy on top of coronavirus. Now, why this focus on 2030? My colleague Ashwani Bashith referred to this, but in fall of 2018, we have what we could call the four horsemen of the apocalypse, four reports that came out in a 2-month period, which really demonstrated the importance of 2030. The United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, Special Report 15, and their 9th emissions gap reports demonstrated that we already have suffered global warming of 1 degree centigrade beyond pre-industrial times with significant climate change. That we are already reaching or about to reach 1.5 degrees centigrade as early as 2030. And we could easily overshoot that to 2 degrees centigrade with dramatic consequences. And to see a reduction by 2030, global greenhouse gas emissions would need to be reduced by 55% if we wanted to stick to 1.5, or 25% if we wanted to not go past 2 degrees centigrade. The chart in the middle shows that. The U.S. Climate Assessment Report was the third report, and this showed very similar predictions to the UN. Focusing on our region, the Northeast, the report said that we would be the worst hit. We would have increased precipitation, flooding, and heat. We would have massive failures of infrastructure. We would have climate refugees, needs for reconstruction, heat-related deaths, disruption of service and resource supply infrastructure, resulting in a lower quality of life, economic decline, and increased social inequality and loss of public services. And if we didn't change things, by the end of the century, we could have as much as a 5 degrees Celsius, a 9 degree Fahrenheit change. So the fourth report, which was from the Lancet, which is a British health journal, basically looked at the impacts of climate change, and it showed those changes being raised average temperatures, altered rainfall patterns, ocean acidification, sea level rise, extreme weather, and other air pollutants, all driven by rising temperatures. And the secondary impacts of this were things like flooding, the loss of fish, reduced physical work because of the heat, ecosystem collapse and loss of biodiversity, agricultural loss, and increase of pests, heat waves, drought, fire, increased particulate pollution, ozone increases, increased allergy, all of which would create a whole set of health conditions ranging from bacterial diarrhea, undernutrition, mental health consequences, cardiovascular, respiratory, vector-borne diseases, and harmful algae blooms, all of which would interact with social factors like loss of habitat, poverty, mass migration, violent conflict, etc. So we see that this 10-year window that we now have is extremely consequential. Drawing on my work on the Aral Sea disaster, which was a dry run for climate change, we see here that on the right, we have our social awareness of environmental change on the left. And looking at that social awareness, we are generally unaware, or we ignore or resist the consequences of environmental changes around us, changes that we should be monitoring and which should elicit effective action. But by not acting, we adapt to changes as they occur. We miss opportunities to address them. We finally begin to focus when crisis occurs and there's signs of danger. We mobilize a late response when there's acute threat. And we then engage when a disaster occurs, an emergency response, survival, and coping. We see this with the COVID disaster, and we see this with climate change, and the time to act is before there's too little too late. In my work on environmental consequences of contamination and undesired environmental change, I've seen that what I call the theory of environmental turbulence involves the destruction of normalcy for individuals, family, and community that involve changes to our lifestyle, the way we act, to our lifescape, the assumptions we make about normal life, like our health, our control over life, the safety of our homes and environment, our ability to engage in our livelihood, our trust for others and the system we're a part of. And all of this is tied to life strain or our psychological well-being and a loss of it. And so we've seen this continually over work I've done since the 70s. It's true of climate change as it is of the experience we're now having of the coronavirus pandemic. And we see at the same time environmental turbulence at the societal level, where the normal actions and assumptions don't work and there's stress in all systems. And so the question of really acting becomes important. And this raises the question of whether the paradigmatic challenge that we have now with COVID and that we have with climate change can lead to a real change in the way we do things, a change in paradigm. Working off of Thomas Kuhn's classic model, we see the threatening change leads to anomalies or things we don't expect. There's a defense of the paradigm, which we saw with the denial of climate change, and we see with the denial that originally occurred with coronavirus. We get plunged into a crisis when the disaster doesn't go away, and we have to then define and transition to a new way of thinking. And once we do that, we have the possibility of what Kuhn called a paradigmatic revolution, or a move to a new sustainable paradigm, one that would allow us to address threats in the long term, preserving our health, well-being, and habitability. And the coronavirus experience has taught everyone in the world basically these basic concepts that, in fact, that as a society and as individuals, we need to change our behavior if we're going to flatten the curve. And that's the same issue with climate change. So
Thank you,
those
Mike.
are the comments I
30
wanted
seconds.
to make. Let's move forward to Alexa Torres. Thank you.
Alexa, do you have it?
Yes, hello, just one moment. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, thank you for that, Mike. I am really honored to be here today. Thank you everyone for including me with this, and I hope to make a great contribution, and I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of this. So my name is Alexa Torres. I am a intersectional ecofeminist activist, change agent. I'm a graduate of Ramapo College. I'm a U.S. Forest Service wildland firefighter. I'm a writer. I'm a Hudson County, New Jersey native. I'm a food grower, Puerto Rican and Colombian woman with Taino ancestry. I'm the sound of the coquí in the night, native to Puerto Rico. I'm the color of a little café con leche in the morning, and I'm a 21st century American millennial trying to make a loving home on this planet for themselves and others. I share my story with you because I believe that sharing stories is an ancient way to opening the door to real human and soul connection. And what better way to open than with that, I think. I present this info as a way for those who may not be informed on environmental justice to become familiar, and for a way in which I think current professionals in the environmental field can better understand the struggle of those we have coined the most vulnerable, who face the most discrimination. To begin with Dr. Robert Bullard, he is known as the father of environmental justice. So he believes climate justice is the #1 problem of the 21st century. It is an equity issue, as we all know. It is, he believes it's the most peculiar aspect of climate change is that the populations that contribute least to the problem of climate change are most likely to feel its impacts. Such disproportionality makes it a serious social justice issue. So therein you can see the ties between the environment and social justice. And the US EPA, this is what they have to say on environmental justice, which we're very thankful for this definition that they are on board with this. However, they have also been criticized for not acknowledging environmental justice sooner and doing more. The environmental justice movement was started by activists, scientists, thinkers, policymakers, citizens, collective of people that were frustrated with disproportionate health, environmental, and social effects on lower income and communities of color especially. So as you can see, they acknowledge that it is the fair treatment, no matter race, color, national origin, income, in relation to development, implementation, enforcement of laws, regulations, and policies. So the most vulnerable populations, they are the lower income communities and communities of color, which include poor and working class communities. Again, they're pre-exposed to higher rates of respiratory issues and cancer. Also indigenous populations, immigrant communities, elderly and disabled persons. So many of these people are also, in relation to coronavirus 19, they're now the essential workers. Essential workers, a lot of the time, their job source hubs are in areas like service industries, grocery stores, postal workers. So, and of course, many of these workers, many of the times they're a lot more stressed and not able to stay home from work and work from home. So in this case, I believe that essential is synonymous with sacrificial, being that the sacrificial of the few is for the good of the all. In this case, the all is those who can better protect themselves through PPE, working from home. And I believe that this is one of the greatest ways this government and the nation's ruling class has failed us. These populations are pre-exposed because they live in environmental justice communities with higher rates of respiratory issues, cancer due to proximity of public and private industries and services such as incinerators, highways, Superfund sites, and rail yards, to name a few from my personal experience growing up in an environmental justice community. So again, this from April 8th, we have this from the CDC, some of the newest findings, and you can see here in bold, it said that patients, similarly in the COVID net catchment population, approximately 59% of residents are white, 80% are Black, and 14% are Hispanic. However, among 580 hospitalized COVID-19 patients with race ethnicity data, approximately 45% were white, 33% were Black, and 8% were Hispanic. And this suggests that Black populations might be disproportionately affected by COVID-19. And if you look at where many of these populations are concentrated, again, it is in these environmental justice communities. So it completely makes sense. And this is just evidence that there needs to be more done for these communities. They need to be focused and centered on. So again, youth awareness. The youth are a lot more active and they've been at the forefront. Many of them believe they're at the forefront of the Green New Deal and the reason why it is so successful. And again, it's been at least 7 years since the Industrial Revolution, and we know now the Industrial Revolution was a time when basically things started to get a lot more chaotic for the earth and for all of its inhabitants. We have faster rate of spread due to internet. There's greater diversity of peoples in the US. We have recent movements of struggle, including the Black Lives Matter movement, civil rights movement, farm workers movement, and with that, we still have many of activists that are still alive today. So we have many people to look up to in regards to that. There are also increase of elected officials of color that support the Green New Deal. One of the biggest ones was Bernie Sanders, who was running for election this past year. There's also an increased frustration among urban underserved youth. There's an increase in gentrification and displacement of families. And so, of course, the youth are angry, they're frustrated, they feel disempowered, many of them in urban areas. So there's a greater mobilization through grassroots efforts as well.
30 seconds, Alexa.
So with all of that, these are some things that I believe that we can better the situation, focusing on lower income communities and communities of color that, again, are most infected by COVID and just have disproportionate health issues. So I believe plans and policies must be based on vulnerable populations, inform and better educate these communities through the public schooling systems, in school and after school environmental programs. We must create intentional communities and spaces for connection, and very much online now that we're all in quarantine and we're all working from home. Everyone is interacting online, so we need to boost our presence on social media platforms. And we need to incorporate more things like art, speakers, food, and dance, as youth are very much drawn to these things, possibly also just giving away free informational packets, handouts, posters, free swag. And communication is everything, so we need to find common ground common ground with organizations that are doing the work, including community centers, groups, organizations of colors that are also fighting for fundamental change within the system. Thank you so much, and I pass it on.
You okay, Harriet?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
You're coming through with echo, Harriet.
Yes, you have to mute yourselves.
Everybody needs to mute.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Alexa. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Ashwani, for setting the stage, for reminding us of the reality of the climate crisis, and for reminding us that it impacts people very differently. I am excited to be with you now to be able to move into the sections of our Solve Climate by 2030, this first solution section, which looks at transforming education, and to be participating in this section with my dear friend, Lynn Cherry. Among the many hats that Lynn wears, Lynn is a renowned author, educator, filmmaker, and founder of Young Voices for the Planet, an organization which I am honored to serve as board chair. Young Voices for the Planet is the recommended follow-up curriculum resource for all 50 state Solve Climate by 2030 discussions taking place around the country. And we are honored to have Lynn here with us, and you'll hear directly from her shortly. What I hope to do now is to set the stage for the importance of climate education broadly as a clear path to promoting climate action. I'm opening this section wearing my hat as a professor at Ramapo College of New Jersey, the New Jersey state host for Solve Climate by 2030. I have been asked to share my experience at Ramapo College with teaching climate change, and as many of you watching are educators, college or high school students, it's critically important that, as the Solve Climate by 2030 program asks of us, that we make climate a class in every college and in every school and at every level of education. I'm thrilled and honored to share with you that at Ramapo College, we have created a class called Climate Change in Society, which in the fall of 2019 was offered for the first time as a general education course, meaning students from multiple disciplines can take this class to fulfill a general education requirement. In this class, students learn the science of our climate crisis and also policy recommendations to solve it, actions they can take collectively, individually, and together at the international, national, state, local, and community levels, actions to slow down the crisis before us. Unfortunately, teaching climate as a class to a broad and diverse student body is still a relatively novel situation, but we hope that this dialogue and others like it will make this a much more common phenomenon. And we at Ramapo College are happy to share our experiences. As you will hear from Lynn, the impact of our crisis when taught as part of a course curriculum presents many opportunities to move students to action in real and measurable ways. Teaching climate as part of general education, cross-curricular and cross-disciplines is important on so many levels. Understanding the science and identifying the civic responsibilities that come with this knowledge should be part of instruction across disciplines, and with all of your help, we can do this. Given that you're participating in this event, you likely understand that our climate emergency impacts all aspects of our lives, not only today, but for the rest of our lives. And hiding our heads in the sand and pretending it won't or it can't impact you is similar to denying COVID-19 can't touch each and every one of us. And as with COVID-19, the impacts may present differently for each of us, from the most severe to not even knowing we are affected at all. Similarly to what Alexa shared with us, as we know, with our climate emergency unfolding, people and places in different parts of our country and the world are feeling the effects in different ways. Something that is critically important to teach as part of any climate class. As we work to make climate a class, including climate justice and the environmental justice must be part of this effort. Recognizing institutionalized and historic injustices that perpetuate and exacerbate global poverty also have local implications, including the right to clean air, clean water, a healthy environment, and food security. These are human rights. We all must be advocates for climate justice and a just transition to a renewable future and now. These concepts deserve and demand a prominent place in all policies and actions on climate. Learning about the climate crisis, offering courses at higher education institutions like we're doing at Ramapo College is critical and critically important. A February 4th, 2020 study by professors at San Jose University in California showed just how important this may be. They look at the long-term impacts that an intensive one-year university course had on an individual's carbon emissions. The study surveyed students at least 5 years after taking the course. Surveys and focus group interviews identified the course graduates developed a strong personal connection to climate change solutions, and this is realized in their daily behaviors and through their professional careers. The authors of the paper showed how their analysis demonstrated that if similar education programs were applied at scale, the potential reduction in carbon emissions would be similar in magnitude to other large-scale mitigation strategies such as rooftop solar or electric vehicles. Let me repeat this once more. Their analysis demonstrated that if similar education programs were applied at scale, the potential reduction in carbon emissions would be similar in magnitude to other large-scale mitigation strategies such as rooftop solar or electric vehicles. I will now turn it over to Lynn. Thank you.
Share screen. Oops, share screen first.
After you get your first slide up, Lynn, just pause for 5 seconds.
Share screen. Okay. Okay. Youth as catalyst to change. Youth as catalyst to climate by 2030. I'm Lynn Cherry. I'm a children's book author and illustrator, and the director of Young Voices for the Planet, and the producer of the Young Voices for the Planet film series. Kids can make a difference. Kids have power. My take-home messages from this will be that before sharing information about climate change with students, it's important to present solutions. Motivated avoidance is this when people think something is so intractable and troubling that they can't make it it can't make a difference if they do anything about it. They're motivated to avoid hearing about it again, and that is often the case with climate change if there are no solutions presented. We need to show students and children, youth like them, to show them what they can do. This is called, this is providing role models. This is called social modeling. People must have self-efficacy before they'll take action. They have to believe that their action is going to bear fruit. They have to have self-efficacy. We have climate change, we have a climate crisis, but we also have a democracy crisis and a social justice crisis. And I'm going to be talking later about the Young Voices for the Planet film series and the Young Voices for the Planet Civic Engagement and Democracy curriculum, which is the curriculum that is endorsed by 2030, by Solve Climate by 2030. And the Civic Engagement and Democracy curriculum is freely available on our website, youngvoicesfortheplanet.com. So as we're all aware, young people are taking to the streets and they're really wanting change. And when I was doing children's books, I wrote The Great Kapok Tree. I would tell the kids about the destruction of the tropical rainforest, and I'd watch them just get totally upset about it. And I realized this was not empowering. So I started telling them success stories about kids saving forests, and this completely changed the way they were able to hear the science, because they were not motivated to avoid hearing about it, thinking that it was impossible. By seeing these other role models, they realized that like the kids who look like them, they could do it too. So Greta has provided a role model for a lot of kids throughout the world. I wrote this book, How We Know What We Know About Our Changing Climate, with Gary Brosh. It was all the truth, but people were pushing it away because it wasn't just about hearing the truth. It was about what were the solutions. So we have to consider the psychological effects of the dire environmental news, especially with climate change, and precede the teaching of science with success stories. Doom and gloom shuts people down. Success stories empower and motivate. Very important. So the mission of Young Voices for the Planet is to limit climate change by empowering youth to change minds, change laws, and change the world, inspired by the films in the Young Voices for the Planet series, which you can watch, as I said, youngvoicesfortheplanet.com. There's the down below, which you can watch after anytime, freely available. This was an article that I wrote. You can Google it, on motivated avoidance for the New York Times blog.earth. So I found these wonderful stories of kids. These girls, they learned about sea level rise. They did an energy audit of their school, saved their school $53,000 in energy bills. Great role models. Felix Finkbeiner learned about climate change, learned that trees sequester carbon, planted 1 billion trees. That's called Plant for the Planet. And children are changing laws, even though they are not old enough to vote. And this was the most exciting thing about these films, watching these kids. This was from Team Marine. They testified they got the first plastic bag ban in the U.S., and it was high school kids. These girls in Save Tomorrow, they were 9 years old, learned that their town had a law prohibiting solar panels on town buildings. They testified at their town meeting. They got a standing ovation. The law was overturned. The town then went and put solar panels on every public building. The kids got a huge solar array. They got their town to reconsider its investment portfolio, getting rid of fossil fuels, and they have just really made a big difference in this town. So children can change minds and change laws, even though they can't vote. We can't cover every story in a movie, but we have this action map, which has a lot of the other kids around the country, actually around the world, who are reducing CO2 emissions through their actions. They're all youth solutions to the climate crisis. And we hope that you'll share them. A lot of the information in the films, on the pedagogy of the films, is the research of Albert Bandura, who is the most famous living psychologist. He coined the term self-efficacy. He coined the term social modeling. So we have an article that's just coming out in American Psychologist, if you want to take a look at it, about enlisting the power of youth for climate change. Our latest movie also brings in social justice. This is Jasa Mellers. She was 10 when she learned that her asthma was being caused by the coal-fired power plant nearby. She started speaking at rallies, testified at city council, and she ended up with this group that she was working with, shutting down the coal-fired power plant. And she is just in the current issue of Time for Kids. She is very concerned about civic engagement. And when she was in this, we were on Radio Kingston, and when this talk show host asked her, what do you think is the most important thing that kids can do? She said, they need to advocate to get civics into their classrooms. And this is why it's not just a climate crisis, it's a democracy crisis. She says, in this interview, she said, why aren't they teaching us this, how to participate? Don't they want us to know? She says, she had the kids raise their hand at this youth summit. How many of you have civics? 2 raised their hand. She said, we need to know how we can participate in our own governance. We need to know how the system works. And this is about local governance. It's about going to your town meeting, your city council, and actually getting your parents to run for office. So she participated in Drawdown Learn, which was at Omega. This was, if any of you don't know about Drawdown, 100 solutions to reducing CO2 emissions, to drawing down CO2 out of the atmosphere. And one of the things Jasa said as she looked at this audience, she said, not very many dark faces out there. So she was saying the importance of bringing in everybody under this tent. It doesn't matter what background you're from. And she said, LGBTQ, all the different groups. She wanted to bring everybody in under this tent. So the civic engagement and democracy curriculum is, again, freely available online under 4 teachers. And the action plan is under Take Action. And this is about developing self-efficacy, a person's belief in their ability to make change in their own life and in the world at large. And there's the curriculum for all the different grades, and it's all about changing, getting involved in your local governance and changing laws. It also is framed not as activism, but it's framed as the democratic tradition of this country about fighting for rights. It's patriotic. We have our whole tradition in this country fighting for women's rights, civil rights, children's rights, human rights. And now it's about the rights of young people to have a survivable planet, to be able to live, to simply live. That's what they're fighting for now. The Children's March is a great movie to share with students. It's about how it was young people who jump-started the civil rights movement. Many people don't know this, but the adults were afraid to go out and march. The kids, it was thousands of them. This is an amazing film. So the action plan is really simple. It's an acronym. A is you assess and analyze what local issues most concern you. C, who do you collaborate with? T, find your timetable. I, identify who the influences are, who you can talk to and enlist as mentors and who can actually help you move forward what you want to do. And I always say, if you find somebody and they say, they're lukewarm, they're not real excited, you say, thank you very much, and you keep going until you find a yes person, because you'll find a lot of no people, but it's when you find that yes person that's identifying that mentor, that influencer. Organize your thoughts, your goals, and then organize your meeting. And in one of the movies, Save Tomorrow, at the end, it's wonderful. One of the girls says, find your team, find your passion, find your power. And this is O, finding your power. N is the news, sharing the news with the media and with your community. So lesson 8 is just a laundry list of all the things that you could do, and these are things young people are doing. They're on the action map: transforming the town's energy sources, converting their bus fleet, banning plastic bags, getting your restaurants to stop using plastic drinking straws, but changing the laws, changing the system. And the curriculum is really based mainly on systemic change. So it's not just like a one-off. It's like changing the whole system of your school so your energy, you're conserving energy, changing the whole system of your school bus fleet so it's electric buses, and that's the idea. So these are what kids can do: speak up, give public comment, schedule a meeting with elected officials, do petitions, posted drawings. And right now, I know in New Jersey, there's a law pending to get civic education in the schools. And if you go to our website, we have this listed on all the civic education legislation that is pending and being introduced. So get involved with this and have the students get involved with making sure that they advocate for getting civic education in their classes. We have a workshop series, thanks to the Heinz Endowments, that's also online. And why children make the best messengers, because they occupy a moral high ground, they bring the future into the room, and they reach adults' hearts. They inspire their peers. So as far as action items for your area, create an action plan using the curriculum and figure out, just maybe one of the things you do is what Suncommon did in New York and Vermont, where they put on a climate action film festival to sell out crowds in every theater and educating the public and inspiring them with these action-oriented films. So we know the kids are out in the streets, but we want them actually into these places where they can be making the difference. Again, take-home messages, present solutions, remember about motivated avoidance, consider social modeling, showing them the models of other kids, develop self-efficacy. Remember, it's a democracy crisis as well as a social justice and a climate crisis. And remember the Young Voices for the Planet films address all these issues, provide you with the success stories, the social modeling, and the civic engagement curriculum is endorsed by Climate Solutions by 2030, and it's linked on their website. It's global.
Excellent.
Cool. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you. Can we move this on to Paula?
Wait a second. I just want to change. There we go. Okay. Hi, I'm Paula Rogovin. I'm from the Don't Gas the Meadowlands Coalition. I'm a retired New York City public school teacher, 44 years, and now retired to nearly full-time environmental activism. I'd like to tell you about our local efforts to stop 2 fossil fuel power plants here in northern New Jersey. Mitsubishi's proposed Meadowlands frac gas power plant, which we defeated, and Governor Murphy's New Jersey Transit power plant, which we're still fighting. Both were to be in environmental justice communities. Governor Murphy in 2018 signed an executive order to protect environmental justice communities, but we're seeing with these proposals that that is not happening. At our May 20th March for Our Lungs, high school student leader Romina Rojas said, "The construction of this power plant, the Meadowlands power plant, is just repeating the historical pattern of placing unfair environmental burdens on environmental vulnerable communities known as environmental justice communities." Why are these power plants so bad? The pollution gets into the air, the water, the lungs, and the land. It gets into our lungs. It contributes to climate change. It threatens wildlife. It harms our health, leaving people more vulnerable, especially in environmental justice communities during this, and they're heavily impacted during this COVID-19 pandemic. North Jersey is already rated F by the American Lung Association for ground level ozone or smog. This is horrendous for people with asthma, COPD, heart problems, and other health conditions. We worked in coalition with groups in North Jersey and around the state. We had constant actions, constant. We had billboards in Ridgefield, Fairview, and even on the New Jersey Turnpike. Each time we held a press conference, we held rallies, we did street theater, we did door-to-door canvassing in Bergen and in Hudson counties. Before the COVID-19 crisis, we bird dogged Governor Murphy. We went to his town halls, his press conference, and other events to try to get him to hear our demands. We, along with 60 organizations from Empower New Jersey, held Moratorium Mondays, where we urged people in the various organizations to call the governor's office and to demand a moratorium on fossil fuel projects around the state. We held educational forums. We got 52 town councils in Bergen County to pass resolutions to oppose the Meadowlands power plant. May 18th, 2019, we held a student-led march, March for Our Lungs. It went from Ridgefield Memorial High School to in Ridgefield, New Jersey, to the site right near the site of the proposed Meadowlands power plant. We won that fight to stop the Meadowlands power plant when Governor Murphy said that this plant did not make sense for New Jersey. But shortly after that, we learned about his proposal to put in the New Jersey Transit power plant in the Meadowlands and Kearney. and environmental justice community. If you go to nomeadowlandspowerplant.com, there are lots of ways you can learn more about this particular fight and ways you can get involved. You can see that this train that is powered by renewable energy, we have developed, along with some experts on renewable energy, we've developed a proposal which we've submitted to New Jersey Transit for renewable energy rail plus battery storage. They have this in Australia, Austria, and some other countries. And so we are pushing ahead to say, frack gas power plant, we say no, renewable rail is the way to go. We've been in talks with New Jersey Transit officials about this alternative. We have marched and rallied, made phone calls and bird dogged the governor and more to try to stop the New Jersey Transit power plant. We have demonstrated in front of the monthly New Jersey Transit board meetings in Newark, New Jersey. But during the COVID-19 crisis, we know that the governor must focus on the pandemic, but we want to be sure that the New Jersey Transit power plant proposal isn't moving forward. We want to make sure that other fossil fuel projects are not moving forward. So 60 organizations sent a letter to Governor Murphy calling on him to pause all of the proposed fossil fuel projects until a time when the pandemic eases and there can be full public participation. You can see the website there, empowernewjersey.com. It has a copy, it has information about this. There's a petition. The fight must go on during this crisis, but we have to be creative, finding ways to keep people off the streets, but on the internet in all different ways, and using the postal service too. So just a quickie before I end, on April 7th, 17 of us spoke by phone at the New Jersey Transit Board meeting, which was live streamed. It was so exciting. We had voices from all over North Jersey explaining why we must not have this power plant. We hope that you'll get involved in this fight for a fossil-free future and fossil fuel energy future. So go to empowernewjersey.com, nomeadowlandspowerplant.com. You'll see educational materials, leaflets, petitions, and so many other ways that you can get other people involved. We'll hope you join this fight. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt, do you have it?
Great, thanks, Ash. And greetings, everyone. My name is Matt Smith. I'm the State Director for Food and Water Watch and Food and Water Action here in New Jersey. And I'm going to be talking about a practical solution, community energy aggregation. So before I start there, just a few basics. Right now, despite the urgency of the climate crisis and the urgent need to get off fossil fuels, the state of New Jersey only sources about 5% of its electricity from clean renewable sources like solar and wind. The rest of our state's electricity is still running off of very old nuclear power plants and a majority of natural gas powered electricity, of which Paula was just talking about some of the ways that that impacts our communities. But thankfully, we have a way to, despite the inaction at the federal level and the slow action at our state level, really take power into our own hands at the local level through community choice aggregation. So what is community choice aggregation? Essentially, it allows residents of a community to bulk purchase their electricity together. By bulk purchasing, similar to going to Costco, when you buy 100 bags of potato chips, it's cheaper than buying one. By pooling our resources together at the local level, we can get cheaper rates on our electricity bills. And we can also take control of the sources of that electricity. And under community choice aggregation, a municipality would bulk buy the energy for their residents and access discounted prices. And then any resident can still opt in or opt out of the program. But this is a tool that we can use both for cost savings as well as to access more clean, renewable energy options in our communities. So here at Food and Water Watch, we've been campaigning to pass community energy aggregation policies at the local level in towns and cities across the state. We started our campaign in 2018 in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And thanks to our successful petition initiative in New Brunswick, the city council there enacted a 100% renewable energy aggregation program. And what we did was we structured it so that it didn't go to 100% renewable right away. We start off at 50% renewable and scale up to 100% by 2030. And the reason we go to 100 by 2030, we'll talk about a little later, but the reason why we created this tiered system is that this will allow residents to not only get access to clean energy choices, but we're actually seeing cost savings at the 50% renewable level. So this will allow for really everyone, low-income residents, community members in towns and cities across the state to get more access to clean energy sources while not driving up their electricity bills. And as we talked about, and really the whole frame for today is taking climate action by 2030. And so really the reports that were detailed at the beginning of the webinar talk about the urgent need to cut greenhouse gas emissions nearly in half globally by the year 2030. And fossil fuels are the #1 producer of greenhouse gas emissions globally. So by getting our towns and cities to transition to 100% clean energy by 2030, we can be part of the solution of cutting our greenhouse gases to meet those targets that we need to avoid what are called climate tipping points, right? So if we don't reduce our emissions globally in half by 2030, we'll trigger irreversible climate change due to positive feedback loops. So this is not only a very bold solution, but it's a very practical one. It's not only about fighting climate change. New Jersey's air quality is among the most polluted in the United States. The American Lung Association, for 2 years in a row, has rated New Jersey an F, failing quality for ozone pollution. Ozone pollution is linked to a whole range of lung disease, heart disease, and in fact, scientists at Harvard University this week concluded that smog pollution is actually making the COVID-19 pandemic even more deadly because it is aggravating pre-existing lung conditions caused by smog pollution. So fossil fuels is a major contributor to smog pollution. Even natural gas, which has been really falsely marketed to the United States as a clean alternative to coal, natural gas produces tremendous amounts of particulate matter and nitrogen oxides, which react with sunlight to create smog pollution, which in turn affects our lungs, makes us sick, and even kills people. So obviously we know about the urgency of the climate crisis. So by switching to clean energy at the local level, we can address these dual crises, our public health crises and our climate crises, with one practical solution. So the way this works is that townships would actually go out to bid and see which renewable energy providers can provide electricity for all of their residents at the cheapest rates. And I talked a little bit about the example of New Brunswick, and you can see that before we won our clean energy aggregation policy in New Brunswick, this is where I live, we were paying PSE&G a little over 12 cents per kilowatt hour of electricity that we consumed. Now, under the 100% renewable New Brunswick policy that we enacted, residents have two options. They can choose 50% renewable and save, the average household savings is about $100 per year, or they can go to 100% renewable and still save nearly $40 on their electricity bills. And there's some other examples here of other towns throughout New Jersey who are also seeing cost savings, even with the switch to 100% clean sources. So it's really dispelling the myth that clean energy is not affordable. The way we did this in New Brunswick was we circulated petitions, got 10% of the voters in our town to sign a petition, and that forced the city council to vote on it, and the city council then passed our ordinance. Then last year, 2019, in Piscataway, which was our second town, we again got 10% of the voters in Piscataway to sign our petition. It forced a council vote. The council voted against it. So that triggered an automatic general vote. It put it on the ballot for the 2019 general election. And we educated voters ahead of that election in Piscataway, and Piscataway residents voted overwhelmingly, 2-1. In fact, 63% yes to 37% no in favor of going to 100% clean renewable energy. And so we don't have to just ask our elected officials to do this. We can use the power of citizen petition and initiative to force our city councils to vote on this. And if they don't approve it, we can vote directly on it at the ballot box. So there's a couple ways you can get involved. The first is by texting the words clean energy to the number 69866. So you just start up a new text message in your phone, and to the number 69866, you simply send the words clean energy, and we'll send you a petition right to your phone that you can sign for your town to start a 100% clean energy aggregation program. And if you sign that petition, there's also a volunteer checkbox. And that would, if you check that, one of our organizers at Food and Water Watch will follow up with you to talk about how you can launch a petition initiative for 100% clean energy in your community. So that's all from me. Thank you so much, everyone. And I'm going to turn it back to Ashwani.
Thank you, Matt. Really appreciate it. So Jeff,
I'll try to get. I'll try to forward the. I'm trying to do it on the cell phone, so let me see if I can. If I do this right, because when I was trying to do it earlier, I'll see if it'll go. Oh, what's going on here? Sorry. Sorry.
Jeff, after you get your first slide up, just pause for a few seconds.
Yeah, if I get it up, if I get it on hold. Sorry, something's going on here.
If you prefer, send it to me.
Well, it should go up automatically, but I'll send it to you, and then just to email it to you, just so you have it. But I should be able to do it. I've done it before, so I'll send it to you to have it. And I've done it before from this way, and it should copy to Zoom, and then it says, okay, here, did it get up? It got there? Yeah. You have it?
Yeah, it's there,
Yes.
Jeff.
Okay, great. I know I did it before. So hi, I'm Jeff Tittle, Director, New Jersey Sierra Club, the nation's oldest and largest environmental group. We've been fighting for clean air, clean energy, and protecting public spaces for 28 years now. And I wanted to start off and say that this is also the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. And I was involved in the first Earth Day. And back then, we had rivers on fire, and now we have our house on fire with, what's happening in Brazil and Australia. Back then, because of particulates in the air, people were wearing surgical masks, and now people are wearing surgical masks because of coronavirus. So even though we made a lot of progress, we still have a long way to go. We have right now in this country, unfortunately, a fossil fuel in the White House who's been blocking us moving forward on clean energy and climate change. And, when you look at our president and you realize that, he denies science, he denies climate change, and his, hair denies gravity, that, we have a serious problem. But that doesn't mean we have to give up. States themselves have tremendous amount of powers to be able to reduce and deal with climate change. And in New Jersey, we have a governor who says he's for reducing greenhouse gases, though a lot of what he's said has been hot air because they really haven't taken the bold actions that are needed and really dealt with a sense of urgency. We have to get to 45% reduction by 2030. That is a minimum mandate that we need to get to if we really want to deal with climate impacts. New Jersey is the state in the nation that has had the most climate impacts of virtually any other state. We have more homes than almost any other state, except for one, that have been built in flood-prone areas vulnerable to sea level rise. We're second in the nation for increase in temperature over the last 30 years, and we're seeing these impacts on a daily basis, whether it's fish living in storm drains on Long Beach Island or coastal wetlands disappearing or chronic flooding. We're there, and we're right in the middle of it. And so the first thing that we need to do is when your house is on fire, you need to turn off the gas, to use Greta Thunberg's line about the house being on fire. Right now, there are proposals for 15 fossil fuel projects in New Jersey, and Paula mentioned a couple of them. And if those projects get built, it'll be more than a 30% increase in greenhouse gases, not a reduction. And that's why we need to first have a moratorium. We need to have this time out so that we can then put in place the rules and regulations that we need to do to start getting us to those reductions. For instance, New Jersey has the ability to regulate greenhouse gases. They've had it since 2005. They do not have rules in place. They can also regulate methane, and they can regulate black carbon. What they need to do is, as they regulate it and develop standards, it has to be across the board, what we call life cycle, from wellhead to power plant or factory, from pipeline to automobile to refinery, and start mandating reductions. And we have that authority under what's called Title V air permits, where they can actually start ratcheting down, and we should be targeting the overburdened communities first for those reductions. Another important part that the state of New Jersey can do during this timeout is change the rules and regulations, especially those that were weakened under Christie, to make it easier to build gas pipelines and other things. And there's 7 gas pipeline projects around New Jersey. And again, not only will they promote more greenhouse gases, they'll promote more power plants and also making more plastic bags and other things that we were trying to get out of the environment. So it's critical. And we have those tools. DEP also needs to regulate greenhouse gases from land use and building permits, where people don't realize that cement itself gives off a lot of greenhouse gases, and we cut down forests for more subdivisions in the middle of nowhere. It also releases greenhouse gases. A big part of it is also going after transportation. 45% of our greenhouse gases come from the transportation sector. So not only do we have to move to get to renewable vehicles, we have to expand mass transit, electrify our bus system, and New Jersey Transit's we've been fighting them on that. But also get people to drive less to reduce VMTs. And right now, the New Jersey Turnpike Authority has a proposal to widen over 450 miles of roads. And if those lanes get built, the amount of additional driving and greenhouse gases will actually be more than 38 million tons a year, blowing out many of our reductions we're trying to get other places. So there's real important things in front of us, but we have that ability. The other point that I want to mention is that the state itself can do a lot more legislatively, as well as through other agencies like the BPU, as we ratchet up greenhouse gas reductions through moving forward with clean energy. We can also reduce the greenhouse gases. So New Jersey has the ability to build, governor's proposed about 7,500 megawatts, which is about a little over a third of our power of offshore wind. We can do 1,250 megawatts right now, and that'll be more than half our power. We can get rid of the cap on solar and allow solar to be expanded to get at least a third of our energy. So we have the ability under current tools to be able to get to 100% renewable by 2035 and at least 80% by 2030, which would get us in line with that 45% reduction. And at the same time we're doing that, we also need to be bringing down carbon. And so we can get to net neutral carbon by 2030 relatively easily. We can get to zero carbon by 2040 or 2045, as other states have done or targeted. And so we need to do, legislation as part of it. And also, besides expanding our transportation network, we need to do electrification of housing and get the, through and heat pumps and geothermal, and get basically natural gas out of heating our homes and other fossil fuels. We have a lot we can do, and we need to look at getting lead out of our homes and out of our pipes and out of our waterways and upgrading our water systems as part of this. And by the way, if we get rid of fossil fuel plants, we also get a lot more fresh water because they're one of the biggest users of clean water. And we need to develop a real coastal resiliency plan and get to a coastal commission to regulate along our coast. We have the tools and we have the legal ability to do it. We need to develop through Empower New Jersey, which is a coalition Sierra Club's part of with over 90 other groups and with other people out there, real pressure at the state level to both change things regulatorily and change things in the legislature. And then finally, I'll just briefly talk about some local action we can do. Sierra Club is a strong believer in getting to 100% renewable at the local level by 2030 as well. And towns and cities can do a lot. They can not only do aggregation, but they can build their own solar farms through community solar. They can also contract directly to bring in offshore wind. They can develop programs on energy efficiency. They can change their zoning to make the cities more energy efficient and to encourage more transit. And some cities are even putting in their own transit systems and doing carpools and vehicle reduction programs to help get people out of cars and expand bike paths and other things to help reduce greenhouse gases, and also planting trees, changing building codes, putting in things like green roofs and planting more trees. There's a lot we can do at the state level, but we can also do a lot at the local level. And what I basically believe is, here on the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, we need to look not only at this year and the next 10 years, but go out 50 years like we have done, and where we can be 50 years from now. And if all of us kind of work together and we push hard, we can not only meet those goals by 2030, but we can have a much greener and more sustainable planet by 2070, which if we don't, we're all going to need snorkels. So it's critical for us this year. And just want to end with that. We are really one, we have one environment, we are one people, and we are one planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. That was fabulous. Really appreciate it. So we'll go now to Amanda, and she'll take up the municipal piece of this. Okay, Harriet, you can stop the recording now.
Okay.